hey, you know what? Here's the end goal that I would really love to achieve. And then thinking backwards as to how do I get there? What are the steps? What's the process that I need to do in order to reach that goal? The power of your mind is so strong, like if you have, you think about prisoners of war or something like that. Like, I don't understand like how they maintain their sanity, but it's nothing but just the strength of their mind, and to be able to keep them locked in. I mean, I have visualization boards, and I mean, it's so weird where, I just never will forget, I put up, pictures of like a condo and stuff like that. Like, oh, I wanted to own a beachfront condo, and dang, it was amazing to me. Like, even when we decided to pull the trigger on one, how closely it resembled the one that was on the board.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Abundant Journey podcast. I'm your host, Nick James. You probably know that by now, with my co-host, Nick Offenkamp. As always, we got another amazing interview lined up today. Phil Wilkins coming to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Phil, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for hanging out with us. So, Phil, you and I recently have had a chance to get to know each other, and that is, of course, because the Abundant Journey Network continues to grow. And we were graciously introduced by Mark Wadlington, who gave us an introduction. He was on, what, Nick, 5 or 6 episodes ago?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, man, as soon as we started talking, Phil, on the phone, there was some energy, there was some connectivity, and I am super pumped to jump into your story. Now, again, I've spent a little bit of time getting to know you, but our guests don't know you. So tell us who you are, what's a day in the life look like today, and then we're going to go backwards to your incredible story.
Well, I appreciate it, Nick. And it's just great to be here and a great opportunity to be here. Day in the life, I'm a founder today of a company called BYA Everyday. And there's a story behind the acronym there that we can get into a little bit later. But basically what we are is we're a 360-degree marketing company. My goal in our company is to connect brands to their ideal client and then help those clients build businesses and legacies for themselves and their families. And, I have a couple different verticals in that business: NEMT, non-emergency medical transportation, as well as financials, financial advisors, and helping financial advisors understand how to connect to business owners. But I spent the majority of my time throughout my career in the franchising space as a multi-unit McDonald's owner. So we can get into all of that in a little bit, but definitely those are the verticals there.
I love that. I mean, it's so marketing company, non-emergency transport, which is something that I've never heard of. Financial, yeah. So, I mean, this is quite the convergence of a whole bunch of things that are coming together, which is amazing. I'd love to. I want to get into all of those things, but maybe before we do, to just kind of get a better feel for, all right, who is Phil? Clearly, you've got an entrepreneurial mind. I mean, to be able to build so many businesses, to have the kind of success that you have. And so, take us back into the lab where Phil was made and where this entrepreneurial spirit was first instilled in you. Is that something that came along from childhood, or did this just appear one day?
I kind of think it probably was. I was born in a town called Oxford, Ohio. If you've ever heard of Miami University, that's where Miami University was based. And I grew up there, went to school there, met my wife there, and all those kinds of things, right? Mm-hmm. And so, small town guy, really, Oxford and Miami is pretty much on an island. We're not surrounded by oceans. We're surrounded by cornfields and hogs and everything. It smells a little different.
Right.
The vibe is still the same, island life, But you know what? I think in many ways, one of the things that I think influenced me most, and in some regards, kind of directed my journey was my mom at an early age contracted rheumatoid arthritis. So shortly after I was born, she contracted rheumatoid arthritis and just had a very difficult time with walking, with dressing herself. And my dad worked 5 jobs to provide for us, and my mom was a high school dropout. And so, he was literally up every day, 4:30, 4:45 in the morning, going to work. He cleaned a bank, a library, doctor's office, delivered the mail, was a fireman,
Wow.
and he did this every single day. And so I maybe saw him 15 minutes a day, 15, 20 minutes a day at lunch. It wasn't because he wasn't around. It was because he was working to provide, and so I think that hustle, if you will, definitely transferred to me. That willingness and the ability to provide and be a hard worker for your family was ingrained early, because not only was he just working, but then I think even on the weekends, as a result of her disabilities and illness, everybody was having to help out. He was cleaning, he was cooking on the weekends. I started going to work with him at a very early age. And it's so crazy. I never will forget this one story. And this was just, the library was a job that he used to do. He used to clean this library, and I used to help him because that would help him come home earlier. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward a couple years ago, we bought a family, 3-family in Oxford, and the realtor said, "Hey, we need to go by the city building to sign the document." Well, when I walk into the city building, what I didn't realize was that the city building used to be the old library that my dad used to close. I mean, he used to clean, and I'm literally sitting there, tears coming down my eyes, because, and my son's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "You don't understand. My dad and I used to clean this library, right? And today I'm signing documents on a rental property that will provide generational wealth for you and your brothers," and so that was just like a cool moment to kind of go through. And that just hit me like, so I think that entrepreneurial spirit, or the ability to, and the willingness to work hard came from him. And then I had uncles that were very successful as milk haulers, and one was like the chairman of the National Association of Minority Automobile Dealers. So, I mean, I had examples, role models that way, but I also had examples and role models the other way.
Yeah, sure.
So I was kind of in the middle, right? Like, yeah. Life could have gone either way, but I was very fortunate and very blessed in life to have great role models, and that kind of steered me down the right path.
Mm-hmm. Man, I love the legacy and the impact that had. The other thing that's interesting is as we have conversations with folks, people like you surrounded by entrepreneurs, there's a credit to really that launch pad. But what's interesting to your story is that I would imagine your dad didn't view himself as an entrepreneur, but a whatever it takes kind of a man. And the lessons that were instilled there. What are some other impacts in those early years for you that has really helped launch you? I mean, obviously hard work is one, but what's some other lessons or nuggets along that journey in those early years that really impacted and helped shape who you are today?
I think for me, the family piece, I mean, the illness really allowed, and I think encouraged, closeness. We all had to rely on one another. So, my parents are gone now, but my sister and I are extremely close. We talk every day, and so that's just kind of carried through. And I think when you have that support base, and that cohesiveness, you can endure and go through a lot. If you're physically, emotionally, spiritually strong and you have a strong support base, I think, you can go through a lot of challenges in life. And because of that relationship, I think that has really, really helped me in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how that kind of closeness can get you through so much. And I'd love to hear, I mean, as you're coming out of childhood into your adult years, having to figure out what you're going to do for your career. I mean, was the dream for you, okay, I'm going to do franchises and then I'm going to get into financial planning, NEMT, 360 marketing? I mean, has this just been
No.
step by step, or what was the vision, and how's it all kind of adapted?
The vision was, as any young kid growing up in Ohio, man, I want to go to the NFL,
Yeah.
or do something from a pro, athlete perspective. Now, I will tell you, like, when you go to Miami of Ohio, football is definitely in your blood. And when you
Yeah.
grow up in Ohio, football is in your blood. So I will tell you, like, there were four guys on my block. I, unfortunately, was definitely this guy. But to my next door neighbor is now like a scout with the Jets. This guy over here was on Bo Pelini's staff in Nebraska, and this guy around the corner is the strength coach of the Saints. And so I end up flipping burgers for a living, right? So try to
Oh
figure
man.
that, right? Everybody else is going like to their sports and NFL, and I'm trying to figure out how to do burgers. But really, like once I graduated from school, from college, I was fortunate during college. I had an internship at Procter and Gamble, and so I went into finance and accounting there for about 18 months. Realized I was a square peg in a round hole. And coming out of school, I also had an offer from Baxter Healthcare. And so I quickly called them up, and I spent the next 9 years at Baxter in sales and sales management in the healthcare realm, right? So during that time period, I will never forget, we were always kind of going through restructuring and stuff. And one thing that I always do, and I do it even to this day, Sunday is my day. I think everybody in my family knows he's just kind of in a different place. But I literally go down to my basement and I lock myself, in my office, and I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be interrupted. And that is really my time to think, to dream, to work on, my vision for my business, for my life. And I go into my zone there, and I'm a big believer in visualization, manifestation, and just kind of, you know, talking and seeing and thinking that through.
Yeah.
And I think as entrepreneurs, you definitely have to have that. Well, fast forward, I was always reading about financial literacy and just trying to understand it because it wasn't something that I was taught growing up, or, in school. So I felt like, I had to catch up. And I remember I received a magazine, a subscription to Money Magazine back in the day. And there was this guy on the cover of this one particular magazine, and he had his hands up like this and a big cheesy grin on his face. And he had an arch on his shirt. And I was like, man, who is this guy? So I read his article, and I knew instantly that I was going to pursue being a McDonald's owner. And so if I told you I read that article once, I read it 1,000 times. I can remember his wife's name was Brenda. She worked at Atlantic Richfield. She was a CPA supervisor. She made like 35,000. He made 60,000. He worked at Cummins Engines. I mean, to this day, I can still, remember those details. And I just started networking and talking to people and trying to find connections to someone in the business. And lo and behold, my fiance at the time, wife, her aunt knew a McDonald's owner in Rochester, New York. And then my insurance agent knew someone even in our hometown that was connected to a family. And I got connected with these folks, got introduced to the McDonald's people. And they thought, man, this kid, he's young, but he must have money because of the people that are introducing him, They never asked, I never told. I'm 26 at the time, man. So by this time I was married, 26, just got married, had a home, just bought a ring, paying college debt and everything else.
Yeah.
And so the guys, we had great meetings, and so finally they were like, why don't you apply? Let's get you to apply. And so I'm going through the checklist and the application for McDonald's. It says willing to relocate, dedicate best efforts, and must have $100,000 of unencumbered cash. And I was like, row.
Yeah. I got 2 out of 3.
I had $10,000.
Okay.
$10,000 to my name.
Just 1 0 short,
Details.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Who's counting?
But, maybe it was just I was young and stupid, but I just was like, you know what? I'm going to apply anyway.
Yeah.
And I did. Now, I got rejected really fast, right? Like instantaneously, basically. But I will never forget. I looked at my wife when I received their rejection letter, and we're sitting around the table. And I said, I can't believe they don't see the fit, because in all other categories, we were a perfect fit. I knew that. I could see it. I had marketing experience. I had management experience, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, I feel like calling this guy. And she said, what do you have to lose? And those words changed our lives, right? Like, what do you have to lose? But I called him, and I think that was one thing that kind of separated me and separates me from most. How often do we pursue our goals, maybe get our nose bloodied, and we stop? And I think about all the people that applied for that franchise that were probably more qualified than me, more deserving than me, but they stopped. Versus let me try to figure this out, right? Let's try to work this through. Can I stay in contact with you? And so when I had that conversation with him and I finally proposed, can I stay in contact with you? And he was like, yeah. And so then it was a matter of, okay, I got to create a plan here, right, in order to reach my goal. And so my plan was, I'm going to write him a letter. And I wrote him a letter every month for about 3 years. I'm at $10,000, Harry. Next month, I'm going to be at 15. I'm at 15. I'm going to be at 20. I'm at 20. I'm going to be at 25. And I just literally walked him up the ladder until he finally was like, okay, let's get you in the program, right? And so then the program was, you're going to keep your full-time job working, Monday through Friday, and calling on healthcare facilities in 4 states. But on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you're going to work in a restaurant to learn the business, and you're going to do it for free. So I did that for 3 years. So a lot of people, when they ask about BYA, right? And where does that acronym come from? It came from a college coach that I had that would scream that at the top of his lungs, BYA Everyday, BYA Everyday. But it also came from, I think, all this past history growing up, watching my dad, basically bust his ass every day,
Yeah.
And so the acronym stood for bust your ass every day, BYA every day. That was, and so, I just kind of had that mentality that I'm
Yeah.
not going to lose, right? I'm not going to lose. I'm going to figure it out. I'm not going to lose, and I'm going to get and reach my goal. And so that's kind of the mentality that I take pretty much in that intensity into everything I do. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But
well, really, what I'm hearing is that you were an overnight success 6 years later.
yeah,
Man, oh my God! I mean, Phil, we could probably spend just an hour on this portion of your story, but one thing that comes to mind specifically in this is working without the guarantee of success and that is like one, the mark of an entrepreneur is to keep going if whether or not you think it's going to work. And you clearly showcase that much longer and further than most people do. But it takes, I think, a different level to be able to continue to show up and continue to do that, knowing you may fail. What kept you going without knowing you were going to be able to make it or not?
well, kids help.
Yeah.
Having young kids help. But I think the other side though is, that was a brand that had a proven track record. I mean, to be honest, right? Like, so I think from that regards, not to discount the effort because the effort was like hellacious. And, I don't know if I would repeat it and do it again. But it is a brand with a proven track record. And so that is something that I definitely, laid my hat on is, hey, this is a great opportunity. And I could really relate to it. I mean, selling total parenteral nutrition, amino acids, dextrose, lipids, and water. That's food, but I could really relate to burgers, fries, and a milkshake and a Coke, like that. I could just grab that a little harder. And, the task as far as like clean, sweep, and mop and clean as you go, that wasn't anything that was a real hard stretch for me based off of my upbringing. So I just think it kind of fit me and served its purpose for the amount of years that I was in the business.
And I get that in terms of fit. I mean, one, it's remarkable because it sounds like you were making reasonably good money doing the medical sales and probably could have built a relatively comfortable career there. And so it's remarkable to me that you had this vision of it, like, no, I want more, I want better, I'm going to be a franchise owner. I'm curious, that article that you cited, the one that you could probably just repeat back to us from memory. What was the vision there that was so compelling? Was it a certain amount of money that you felt like you could make through McDonald's? Was it other opportunities that it would open up for you? We haven't had many folks on the show that have gone the franchising route. And so I'd love to hear you just unpack what in particular. Was it just the McDonald's organization, or what drew you in?
No, I mean, I definitely think, that like their journey was inspiring, where it's like, okay, you know what? I think there's a couple things. One, he wasn't making a whole ton of money, in order to start the process. And I don't mind telling you, I mean, back in the day, I was making like 125,000, as a sales manager. So that was good money back then.
Right.
But then when I became an owner, I took a 70% cut and pay. I paid myself $40,000, right? So I had to really live small. And I think that's the temptation for so many entrepreneurs. Now, when I read his story and they started really going, he made like $500,000, had a, beautiful home in Pasadena. And so I definitely kind of saw, okay, he got in it with limited money, really had to work his way through it, had some success, got a second unit, started doing, about $5.5 million in sales pulled out 300,000, 200 for taxes. I probably would have reversed that, by the way. But anyway, but that was kind of his deal, and then bought like a $1.8 million Pasadena home. So I still remember, that detail. And I think that's what the allure, that piece captured me, because I could definitely see a path, and I could relate to the path. Right. So that was the part that grabbed me. Now reality smacked me in the face, right?
Has a tendency to do that, unfortunately.
The allure grabbed me, and then reality smacked me. But and seriously, I mean, and I think this is so important for entrepreneurs, and really even for potential franchisees. I remember calling my CPA and saying, what in the hell did I do? Because I was making, like I said, about 125, and I started paying myself $40,000. And she really broke it down to me, and she said, okay, let me ask you this. How much is your note each month? And it was like $8,079, to be honest with you. And $77,000 of that was principal each month. And she said, how much money would you have had to have made at Baxter Healthcare to really capture $84,000 worth of equity in that company? And I said, well, based off of the stock program, about 700,000. And she said, how many people do you know who are making $700,000 a year, to gain, that kind of equity? And she's like, so you really have to look at it. Every time you're paying that bank and you're adding that equity, you're basically paying yourself. And so I was, that made me feel a little more comfortable in our decision and in my decision. But, when everyone else was driving new cars, had new homes, big screen TVs, I still had, I was still living in my starter home. I drove my car till I had 300,000 miles on it. And I was watching TV on the console TV and not on the big screen, so those are just the sacrifices that I think entrepreneurs have to make sometimes, until you have that level of confidence and know that your business is on solid footing, and you just can't worry about what other people are doing in other people's race.
It's a good word.
Yeah, totally. I think with so many people today trying to keep up with the glam and the social media and all that, it tends to be such a distraction. To take that same thought and kind of shift it a little bit, I think one of the fears that young entrepreneurs wrestle with is that FOMO, fear of missing out on this opportunity or that opportunity. Knowing your story, there was 10 years it was Baxter, and then there were 2 decades in McDonald's, and it's really launched you into the next phase of your career. I wonder though, what kind of word of wisdom would you give to a young entrepreneur who maybe has that shiny object syndrome? Is franchise the best thing for me? Should I start this? And we see that a lot in real estate, where it's like, hey, should I do multifamily or house flipping or Airbnbs, and people are really paralyzed to move forward. For you can look back on the journey and say, well, man, I gave everything I had for 2 decades in this franchise business. What would you say to somebody who really wrestles with that fear of missing out or that shiny object syndrome?
Well, to me, here's what I love about, like, for example, my consulting business. A lot of people kind of think I got to have like 7 streams of income or 7 different revenue, 7 different businesses or whatever else. Before I start any business, I tend to think about what are the different ways that I could make money from that one business, that one core business. Whether it is speaking, whether it is, being a podcaster, whether it's strategic partnerships, connections or whatever. I'm always thinking, like, how can I stay in my core business, but then find various ways to make money without leaving that core business, right? And then that kind of fuels my ADHD, so I'm still working on the core thing, but I'm not going out and starting something else and something new because a lot of times you do that and then your core thing starts to disintegrate. So you got to take care of the main business. And then I think once you settle in on a niche, you know, dive in. I mean, and I think that's for me, I have a lot of experiences, if you will. I mean, franchising with healthcare, and non-emergency medical transportation is still within healthcare, in my opinion. So now with this business, I'm kind of in my niches, if you will. I'm helping financial advisors because I've done that in the past, and I've built programs, and that all really came about just by luck. Not necessarily by luck, but you have to, I think, be able, Nick, in many ways, like here's a bright shiny light, but you have to be able to decipher, is that a real good opportunity, and is that niche, if you will, or is that opportunity rich enough and deep enough, and most importantly, is it aligned with who you are? I've always been passionate about wealth and health equity, right? Always. But when you know my history, you know why that's been in alignment, with me, right? And so when I was speaking at a symposium for financial advisors, and it was more on motivational, if you will, like, becoming a business owner and doing what you do. And the vice president of training of that financial firm comes to me and says, "You're our ideal client. Can you create a program that will help financial advisors understand someone, how to prospect someone just like you? Because you are a business owner, you're a husband, you're a dad, you've got business needs, 529 educational needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And so that past experience at Baxter, where I was a sales manager, sales leader, came into play. The current experience that I had at the time, being a business owner and a leader of an organization with 400 people, came into play. So being able to communicate that to financial advisors, here's how you get in front of someone like me. Here's how you position yourself as an expert. That wasn't something that was so far off, right? And then when I began to think about it and said, okay, I'm doing this for, Merrill Lynch, which was the company at the time. If it's good enough for Merrill Lynch, right? This is the scalability piece. Then it's good enough for A.G. Edwards, Edward Jones, Smith Barney, Lord Abbott, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so just staying within my lane, I was able to find a variety of different opportunities. And then they came back and they said, "Well, what else do you do?" I work on initiatives to help recruit women and minorities into McDonald's. I serve on this board, the National Black McDonald's Operators Association. Oh, our industry has a huge issue with that. Great. Let me go back and get credentialed and let me help you with that. So then we started layering on to that. So, I talk about the business as a whole. I started out with client acquisition, and then it was, hey, let me help you recruit and retain diverse talent. Oh, let me teach you how to penetrate diverse markets. So there's just a variety of different ways off of that one business that I think through and really dream about, how do I build this out? That's what Sunday afternoons are for, you know?
And I'm glad you bring up Sunday afternoons. That was something that from your story I wanted to circle back on and just talk about what that process looks like. Because it sounds like that has been a really impactful discipline for you. You mentioned the value of visualization and manifestation. Think and Grow Rich comes to mind. That's one of those books that, kind of put the visualization on the map for a lot of folks. But would love to hear you unpack both the philosophy, like what were your influences there, but then also just practically what that time looks like for you. Do you have a certain structure that you follow, and how have you seen that play out in the things you've been able to accomplish?
For me, it started probably playing sports in high school and college. I mean, you kind of have to play the game within your mind before you actually hit the field. And, what the mind of man can conceive, it can achieve, those kinds of things. And so I think that was drilled into me early on. And I just realized, the power of your mind it's so strong, like if you have, you think about prisoners of war or something like that. Like, I don't understand like how they maintain their sanity, but it's nothing but just the strength of their mind, and to be able to keep them locked in. And so for me, Nick, it's really, I mean, I have visualization boards, and I mean, it's so weird where, I just never will forget, I put up, pictures of like a condo and stuff like that. Like, oh, I wanted to own a, a beachfront condo, and dang, it was amazing to me. Like, even when we decided to pull the trigger on one, how closely it resembled the one that was on the board, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm not a car guy, but I am a house guy, and I never will forget this even. And this was just so strong. Um, I sold my restaurants back in 2010. And I remember just kind of looking at, and for the first time, I sold them for the first time. And I remember looking at Zillow or whatever else, and I saw this beautiful home. And I thought, man, I like that home. That home was great. Well, I saved it as my screensaver, you know? And so every day I would get on that computer, I'd see this home. Well, I didn't start looking for homes for like a year later, and that house was still on the market. Couldn't get them to move, talk to other people in the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, my realtor called me one day and said, "Hey, that house that you really wanted, um, it has gone on the market. I mean, it has an offer." And I said, "Well, great." So go figure out what they're getting so that we can go back to the other people in the community and kind of get them level set adjusted because it has sat so long. So she calls me back 30 days later and says, "The deal fell through. What do you want me to do?"
Hmm.
And so from that time period, that house dropped. Jeez. I mean, it was huge. It was an unfortunate situation, but multiple six figures. I mean, it just dropped, right? And so we went back, and of course we offered less, and they didn't accept. So we took it, for where it was, but it was still a great deal for us, right? But to me, that was also just being able to watch that and see that and track that, and it was mind blowing to me, like how all that worked out. So I'm just a big believer in that, man. And I just, I think with all of the stimulation that we have in our lives today, to be able to go somewhere, whether it's the beach, whether it's nature, whether it's your office, and just be present, and quiet and grateful and think and dream. That's really cool.
Love that you bring that up because that's not something that a lot of folks have really talked about. And we talk here at Abundant Journey, abundance is not a figure in a bank account. It is really the person and the relationships within the family and, the health components. I mean, we talked health early on in your story. And so there's so many pieces to abundance. But one, I don't know that we have talked much, Nick, with guests on is just that resting, silence, thinking. And obviously that is such an integral part of your story and your journey. I think as I think through that, obviously that has propelled you forward in business. What's the difference? My wife, she laughs and calls me a dreamer because what's the difference? How do you marry the BYA and the manifestation and the dreaming? Like they have to come together, right? Because it's easy to be a dreamer of we see a 90-acre ranch in Montana and say, "Ooh, I'd love to own that. I'll put that as my screensaver." That doesn't make it a reality, right? There has to be so much effort in there. So how have you found the way to marry those two things?
Well, I think there's a couple things that we need to unpack there. One, BYA to me has a definite dual meaning, right? One, bust your ass, right? The other is build your assets. And, my goal is to build assets in all areas of my life: faith, family, fun, fitness, finance, So I think as I've matured, there's a balance there, and we quickly realize when we're out of balance, or we have others that will remind us that we're out of balance. So I just think like at the end of the day, one of my blessings might be, hey, you know what? Here's the end goal that I would really love to achieve. And then thinking backwards as to how do I get there? What are the steps? What's the process that I need to do in order to reach that goal? And that has helped me in good times as well as in tough times, where it's like, ooh, this is dicey and I need to make an exit. What's the net result here? What's the end goal? And what do I need to do? What are the pieces of the puzzle that I need to put into place so that I can, work this out? So that's kind of been the blessing for me. And I don't know if that answered your question or not, because to be honest, I completely forgot it.
I think it does, because I think that that reverse engineering, you have the vision, you have the dream, and then you have to kind of work backwards and say, okay, to realize that, it is going to take that BYA mindset. And obviously you've proven that with your life. Like, Nick joked about the overnight success, and it's like, yeah, that's just not the reality. You grinded for how many years to get to where you wanted to go with just even getting your first McDonald's franchise. There's years and years of grinding within the industry to be able to have an exit from that. And I'm sure that there's been a ton of grinding as well for what you've been building with your marketing business and everything else that's under that. I'd love to. Yeah, go ahead.
The grind is fun. I mean, don't that's the process to me. And the grind, if you will, is not something that is not enjoyable. I'm doing what I love. Yeah. And I've been very blessed and fortunate to be in a number of careers that I drank the Kool-Aid in regards to the mission. And so working and grinding, if you will, it's not unpleasant. It's not unpleasant because I'm doing what I love every day. I don't wake up with an alarm. I wake up because I want to wake up, and I'm blessed to wake up. So I'm doing what I love, and I've been able to really do that throughout my career. And I haven't, like, I've never really had a job where it's like I hate going to work every day.
Yeah. Yeah, let's unpack that a bit further, just the importance of that, because I think that you bring up an interesting point, another one that we haven't talked about too much on this show. There's some people that'll tell you, hey, your passions are great, but don't try and make money from your passions. Find something that's really profitable, work as hard as you can there, make your money, and then use the money that you make in your primary job to fund your passions. And there's other people that they're like, that approach just sounds like it would suffocate my soul, having to do something that I don't love every single day. So maybe just talk a bit more about, have you been in situations, seasons of life, even where you're doing a job or building a business, or it's like, this is not fun? How do you push through that? How do you listen to when you're hating what you're doing? Is that a sure sign that you should pivot and do something else, or you push through?
No, I've had that, and typically the universe, really speaks it to you when you go through that. When it's time for a change, the universe makes it very uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I've gone through that in life, and it 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 was definitely time for a change, and that was, my ending at McDonald's.
Mm.
Middle of COVID, tornadoes, everything else. And it was just a different and difficult workout after 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
But, you grow from that as well, right? And I will never forget, lying in my bed, and I had an apartment, over where my businesses were. And I remember lying in my bed and tears literally streaming down my face, and just thinking that, hey, this is a chapter that's over, you know, but if I have to go through this and all of this that I'm going through to get to where I'm ultimately supposed to be, then I'm okay with that. Right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of got me. And I think sometimes, you kind of go through that as an entrepreneur. And I went through many times challenges where I didn't know if I was going to make it, like if I was going to make the next payroll or whatever, just things are tight. And it's like, nah, you didn't put me here to fail. Like I got to figure this out. But when the writing's on the wall and it's like, you know what, it's time for a change, then hey, embrace it and run with it. And, and you'll find it. But I think a lot of times, Nick, to answer your question, here's my thought. And I understand that, go make money and then you can always fulfill your passions. But, you work for 20 or 30 years in life. You spend anywhere between 8 to 10 hours a day at work for the most part, for the average person, right? You spend more time at work than you do probably with the people that you love most. And so if you are not happy doing that, the majority of your life is going to be miserable. So I would much rather, find an opportunity that aligns with who I am, what I believe in, and embrace that, go in, work that, enjoy that process versus being something where it's just like, I'm in it for the quick money or I'm in it for the money and I can go do something else. I mean, for me, it's a choice. I don't know if there's any right or wrong path, but for me, if I'm going to spend, I don't care, even if it's 4 hours a day, if it's 4 hours a day or even an hour a day of doing something at this stage of my life that I really don't want to do, I ain't doing
it. Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. So.
Yeah. I appreciate that mindset.
No, I do too. You bring up the amount of time spent working, and I would imagine your time as a franchise owner was potentially even more than that. One of the things we like to press into with folks like yourself who have just been tremendously successful in the different things they've done is how do you do that without losing your soul? And unpacking that a little further is how do you do that while maintaining the relationships and investing in the people you love most? What would you say to the entrepreneur who's looking on and saying, I am in the grind, I'm in the thick of it. I have to do this to get to the next level, to get to the next level, but yet I still have to prioritize the other things at home.
Yeah, so my wake up call, and I'll tell you this quick story. Our youngest was a baby. And I remember holding him up and looking at my wife and saying, man, he's so much more advanced than the other two. And she looked at me and she said, the other two boys hit these milestones. You just weren't here to see them. And that sucked. I mean, that really sucked,
Yeah.
but it was true. And so then at that point, it really came down to what are the processes, what are the systems that I have to put into place that could help me get my life back. And that's really the work that I do today with, the NEMT, the non-emergency medical transportation providers, small business owners. Hey, what are the processes and systems that you have in place in order to help you be successful in your business and even in your life, right? And so to me, I think that was one of the key factors for helping me recapture that. I grew up with a dad, as I mentioned, that had 5 jobs, but he never missed a game. So that was one thing that was very important to me, for my sons. I'm not missing a game. I'll figure it out. I'm going to be at your games. You're going to be able to look up in the stands and see me. And so my wife knows, like, it's just, that's my thing, right? That's my thing. And so I think, as entrepreneurs, you have to figure out what's that one thing, that is so important to you that, what, no matter where you are, I do not like missing games. I mean, if I do, I'm on the other side of the earth and I just can't make it.
Yeah, I appreciate that with one sharing that realization of coming to. I know that's a painful thing to realize as a father. I've had those moments in my own life, and so it harkens conversations I've had with my wife. But amazing to hear just the pivot that you're able to make, and I love that principle of like, make the priority, make the commitment of that, whether it's games, whatever it is for you, that like I'm going to be there, and then do the work of actually showing up. And I'm sure that your kids love you for it, and knowing that, hey, dad's always been in the stands. He's always been there for us. So,
well, you realize like you don't get that time back. And the stories are just, I mean, and the other reason, like I put systems in play, right? And hired great people. And so when the boys were off during the summer, my oldest and he was a little older than the younger two. So, I was able to go to different camps with him, like, because he wanted to play football in college. So that's why I put the people and the systems in place so that I could have that flexibility, and that was just a blessing. So if you can, put those systems in place. I mean, yes, it might cost you a little bit more money, but those people that you're putting in place should be paying for themselves, and maybe even then, and even more, where they may have an expertise that you don't have.
yeah.
And that was my situation where actually hiring someone, he was so good operationally that we actually made more money, as a result of that. And he provided me with a buffer and freedom. And that's what it's really about. So that's where I try to help the entrepreneurs. Like, you're not just spending money, you're making an investment, but realize that they have to pay for themselves. They have to help you become free.
Yeah. And just before we transition into our golden nugget round here, I mean, as you're talking about helping entrepreneurs and getting that sort of balance, making strategic hires, just getting to the next level in their business, I imagine that that's resonating with some of the folks that are listening. It certainly resonates with me. And so we will have all of your contact information in the description for this episode. But I'd love to just hear, okay, who are the folks that you're passionate about helping? Who are the folks that you're wanting to reach out to you to work with?
Well, I'm definitely passionate about the small business owner. I mean, that is, my thing. I may not necessarily understand your industry, but I think in many ways what I did for a career enables me to kind of sit down and talk to most business people and be able to relate,
Mm-hmm.
So I think for the most part, the small business owner, or that entrepreneur who is either ramping up, getting going, or at that critical moment where it's time to grow and scale, that's kind of my sweet spot, right? And I think also those financial professionals, because that's a sweet spot, who might want some coaching on how to get connected to their ideal client.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I mean, the journey that I've been on kind of provides itself with, I won't want to say expertise, but just exposure to a lot of different areas. And I think due to, having played senior roles in publicly traded companies where I was, senior vice president and then running my own business for those many years, I'm able to kind of connect the dots and kind of think, hey, you know what? If I'm a leader in a, publicly traded company, what would I want from a supplier, from a vendor, from an employee or whatever? And I've served in that capacity. And then as a business owner, how can I help that person who wants to get in front of those people to sell? Or how can I help that business owner make those connections to the clients that they really want? It's kind of a unique area.
Sure.
Good. Well, should we wrap this thing up? I know we got plenty more we could talk about, but I forewarned you we'd hit you with our gold nugget questions. So
yes,
and
you didn't tell me what they were, though.
That's right. Well, rapid fire. Here we go.
No pressure.
No, that's right. Well, and I say this often, but most of the time, I think throughout the course of the conversation, we hit most of these. But you alluded to it. Here's question one. We are pushing through the rest of 2024. As you look ahead, we got the 5 F's of Abundant Journey. What's one of these that you are really focused on working, growing, honing in on? So family, faith, fitness, finance, future. What's one of these you're really focused on for the rest of the year?
Well, I think for me, being that, my job was eliminated in July, I need all of them, faith. I need family. I'm going on a little fun. I'm going to go to Cancun. Fitness wise, I definitely need to work on that. I think for me though, one of the things that I'm focused on right now is, with this ramp up phase that we're kind of going through with BYA right now, I'm really trying to think of, all right, give yourself some time to get this going. And thankfully, like I'm not really concerned about the ramp up time or whatever, but it's how quickly can we get this up and going to a level where, yeah, you know what, this is a sustainable business and this makes a lot of sense, right? And then at what point do you make a decision and say, it might be time to begin to open up your search a little bit more or whatever. So, for me, I'm in that stage where I'm, and I know this is what all of your entrepreneurs are doing, and I'm no different. I've got a few different verticals. Obviously, the NEMT vertical, it's a, $9 billion vertical today, probably projected to be 16 billion by 2028. It's definitely rich enough, I mean, to find opportunities there. It's just a matter of, what are the opportunities? Is it coaching with small business owners, the NEMT professionals? Is it helping the brands that want to get connected to those folks, and what's the best path forward? Or is it a combination, which it probably is. So that's the real puzzle for me at the moment, is just, figuring out the correct path.
Well, something tells me, based on your experience, you're going to get there, and the Sunday afternoons are going to help. Next one here. What's a quote from a book or mentor that stuck with you along your journey?
Um, I can't remember the exact words, but the biggest fear that we have is mediocrity. Like settling for mediocrity. I'm not a big quote person, but the last thing that I want to do is be mediocre and be stuck in anything. So that's like my biggest fear.
Hmm. And that's a good one to keep driving. That's a good one. Next question here. Why is it important to have an abundance versus scarcity mindset?
Well, I think in many ways, I from a, let me just say, from a faith perspective, okay. Um, Now I grew up Baptist, so sometimes when like you you don't necessarily hear this mindset and that then in the church, right? But my thing is, if you are blessed and fortunate to be successful, then be thankful and understand exactly where that came from and share that, right? And so uh, I'm pretty optimistic. And so I'm always thinking that there is opportunity, there's an abundance of opportunities in life. And with the proper mindset, you will attract that. And with the proper action, you will attain that. And so
Yep.
I'm just a big believer in that.
I love that. It's one of the reasons we do this podcast, for that very reason. So that's a great one. Last one here. What's a dream or goal that you have that you've not been able to make happen yet?
You know, I think for me, and it's taken me a while. I know it's taken me a while. I guess it would probably be more travel. I mean, um, from a materialistic perspective, you know, I've owned multi-million-dollar homes. I've lived on, the beach and all that kind of stuff. It's not important to me. The things that are important to me at this stage, is really like watching my boys progress, develop into men, which they are now, having their families, and I think generationally setting them up for success, that's been my goal since the minute I knew I was going to be a dad was, how do I set these kids up for success, in the next generation and then even the generation after them, if we're fortunate and blessed to do that. So I think a lot of it for young entrepreneurs and young family, check with your CPA. But if you have young kids, definitely employ them in your business and set them up on a Roth IRA and begin to transfer wealth when they are very, very young, so that when they're 30, 25, 30 years old, they've already got a great, great head start. And so I'm so thankful that we had our business when we were in a position to do that for our kids, and if you do those things early in life and in their lives, they'll be very grateful and thankful.
Yeah. Bill, this is so good, man. I'm so glad to connect with you. I'm so excited about that's such a wonderful note to end on in terms of just really it's a legacy that you're building and leaving for your kids. It's setting them up in an even better spot than what you were starting out with. And the hope, right, is that they'll be able to take that and set their kids up to start out in an even better spot than they did. And that's just an exciting thing to think about in the way that you've been a part of setting that trajectory for your family. Also, I love what you're doing with the BYA Everyday business. And for our listeners that do want to connect with you further, there are going to be links. Anywhere in particular, though, that you would recommend that they go, your number one spot?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Phil Wilkins, definitely on Instagram, Phil Wilkins, BYA. They could check out my site, BYAEveryday.com. If they want to leave me an email, that's fine, Phil at BYA Everyday and everyday.com. But yeah, good things are on the horizon there, man. We're real excited about, just the whole BYA brand and what we're doing with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about it too. So listeners, do be sure to check that out. Phil, thank you for everything that you've shared with us. Just awesome story. So much to take away from it. Listeners, thank you for coming along. Do be sure to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Leave a like, share it with everybody so that they can also benefit from Phil's wisdom. And we look forward to being back with y'all in a week or so. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, guys.